We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Abroad Show here on the Blue Abroad YouTube channel. It is Monday, the 30th of September, 2024. It is now the end of the entire season. Every team has finished up. Grand finals happened. I am here with Sean from the Prendercast. Hello, mate.
Hello. Thanks for having me on, Terry.
Welcome back. How's life?
Yeah, it's going all right. It's always a bit sad. It's always a pang of disappointment, a bit of emptiness when the footy season ends. And in a weird sort of way, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's bad enough the AFL season ends and you're like, oh, that's it until February, I suppose, and we get some practice matches and whatnot. But you sort of have this weird feeling of like, even I'm not an NRL fan by any stretch of the imagination, but you're like, oh, there's still like the NRL grand finals next weekend and Melbourne Storm are in it. So yeah, that's good. Oh, there's something for us to watch it for down in Victoria. And then sort of when that's over, it's over. And you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
You just start to really just dread like spring racing carnival. The horse racing does nothing for me, like at all. Cricket, I like cricket, so I can handle that. But just generally, just like, oh, we're really into the dregs now for 4 or 5 months. Just nothing.
Yeah, this is that time where, unfortunately or fortunately, you've got to just face yourself because you've got nothing to distract you from yourself.
Well, yeah, just work on yourself, work on bettering yourself, that kind of stuff. Just work on, numero uno.
Yeah, just work on your habits and yeah.
Adopting, an elite lifestyle, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of habits, I was going to play this later in the show, but you know what? Seeing as we brought up the word,
what I'm hoping to bring to the Blues is, really set high standards for the players and the staff, and really work hard on creating elite habits in the players.
Sorry, I had to.
I just want to put it on the record that if we, I feel like we have to preface it. Is it nothing's personal, Terry? Like nothing's
No,
when we
of
talk
course.
about stuff at the footy club and people performing at the footy club and relatively their performances. Nothing's personal, but it's like every time I see stuff like that, I go, because when did Jack Russell sign with us? Was it 18 for 19?
I believe
It was
that
sort of
video was from
off-season.
18. I believe so, yes.
So look, I remember thinking, oh, fucking wow, like what a capture this is. How good's this? It's unbelievable. It's going to be so good. And it wasn't. It wasn't good. It was bad. It was a waste. It was 6 years of just nothing. We weren't fit. We weren't aerobically fit. We weren't, our best players had kept getting injured. It was a disaster. And there's probably another name that'll come up in much the same vein who I think came on board at the same time. And it's like the longer we delay making a decision, the longer we're stuck with the consequences of not making a decision, which we already know. We already know that if we stick with what we've got, what we are, maybe we should think about making a change and see what we could become. I don't know.
Well, so for me, during the season, I think that's when we're all, yeah, for sure, that's when we're all mostly emotionally invested. But for me, I think now, September, if your season ends early, October, November, maybe a bit of December, this is the only window where change can actually happen. I mean, unless, a month to go before the season, they make the call on Russell and they bring in Rob Innes, there's that, or you sack a coach earlier. But in terms of other football department upgrades, restructures, now is the time if we're going to be doing anything. So,
well, good football clubs will spend, what you've said, spot on. Good football clubs will spend in season assessing what they're doing well, what is working, what they're doing poorly, what needs to be addressed. And then, as you said, they'll put together a pretty, root and branch review of, okay, what are we doing? What do we like? What don't we like? What do we need to think about for next season? And this little window is between now and day one of pre-season is really when you do as much of that as you possibly can, whether that's playing personnel, whether that's off-field personnel, and you really set about taking everything you learnt from the previous 23, 24, 25 games, however many you've played, and then you act. Can we do that? Do we have that in us?
I don't know. I found myself every Monday since we were eliminated. I found myself saying the same thing. Like, I've had to accept that it's happened, because I went into full trust, not even belief. And I've had to accept that it was just, they weren't what I thought they were. And now I feel like I'm stuck not accepting what has happened. And I just get the feeling of it is what it is. And, oh, we've got the fitness boss and health will mean the solution. And I don't know, like, I didn't we do this when we did the redevelopment, the new high performance center, and, the sauna, the ice bath, the recovery. And I don't know, I've just got this broken bone inside of me that hasn't healed.
I think you just want to be, and this is what any fan of any football team ultimately wants is, and I know I've said this on our show many, many times before, it's show me, give me a reason to be your biggest fan and I'll be your biggest fan.
Yeah.
And in some cases, like a David Cunningham, you don't have to show me much and I'll be your biggest fan. But it's like, give me a reason to go in a bat for you. Show me that you are what you say you are and you're doing what you say you're doing and you've learned the lessons you say you've learned. Do all that stuff and you're the same, Tez. We will go in a bat for you every day of the week. But just show us, actually give it to us. We saw moments in 23, obviously in the back end. At the start of 23, you sort of thought, 22 didn't mean anything like it should have to this group. The way that 2022 ended for us, and that should have meant everything. That should have been the driving force. And in the end, you're like, it might not have been. But in the end, they kind of got themselves going and you went, okay, perfect. And then 24, we sort of start relatively well. And we look like a team that's, okay, here we go. They've grown up a little bit. I don't know. And then it looked like we sort of copped one on the jaw. We copped a bit Anthony Joshua-like. We copped one against the Giants and then just didn't ever really recover.
Hmm.
And the question then becomes sort of what you were talking about there is, when we play our best footy, when the Carlton Football Club plays its best football, it can compete with everyone. Now, a lot of teams could say that. When we play our best football, it stacks up against everybody. And you're like, yeah, that's fair enough. There's a lot of teams that could say that. Our best football is magnificent. Our problem is we don't play it for more than 15 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
We might get a few of those spells in a game, but we don't put it together for, even when we went on a bit of a run mid-year and we took care of 4 or 5 teams in a row in the middle of the season, you sort of thought, well, it was the last quarter against Essendon, wasn't it? And it was the last quarter against Geelong, and then there was a 20-minute burst against Richmond where they were within arm's reach and we just put them away in 20 minutes. And you just went, yeah, this is brilliant if you can unlock it for long enough. So the question then becomes, why?
Yeah.
Other teams are always doing whatever they can to slow you down, to put the brakes on you. Not a problem in the world. You're playing against an opponent who's reacting to what you're doing and he's going to try to stop what you're doing. But for us, it's everyone. We've seen it. Our opponents have seen it. Everyone has seen the best football that Carlton plays is excellent. But everyone also knows that we're a bit flaky. We don't play it very consistently. It doesn't take too much to rock us back on our heels. And then you've probably got us under control.
Ask enough questions and we'll give you the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from Saturday, from the granny, did you watch the granny?
Yeah.
What did you take away from Saturday?
I think in the end, what we're seeing in footy at the moment is, and we were an example of it last season. The GWS were as well, but it's all about the footballs, and Hawthorn were this season too. A degree of football now is the season is so long that what you do across the balance of the season is sort of irrelevant. You've really got to be in a position in the last 8, 9, probably that's about it, 8 weeks, to be on top of the ground, playing your best footy, have your best availability. I know that sounds ridiculous, of course, but we're seeing teams make runs seemingly now from, quote, too far back. What used to be, they're done, they're out of it. they're no good, they're too far back. And in the case of the Lions, they were unbelievable in the last 8, 9, 10 weeks of the year. They were just incredible. And the game for me was won and lost by Brisbane's ability to control space. So they just absolutely made Heaney, Goulden, and Warner non-entities by contracting the space in the contest. You had Dunkley, and you had Neal, and you had obviously Ashcroft was fantastic. And then spread. The spread was unbelievable. When they had the ball, the contest was fierce and it was tight. And when they were able to break, the space on the ground, the length on the ground was unbelievable. And they did something that, like all Carlton fans, it's very easy for us to sit here on the Monday after the grand final and say Carlton should play the way the Premiers played. Yeah. But you of course, but the way they were able to get space for their forwards to either lead back into or lead up into, creating lanes and channels and whatnot, was just unbelievable. And you just went, why aren't we trying? Why can't we do this? Are we trying to do it and we can't? Are we trying something else? Just the way they were able to utilize space and create space for their guys to get, even if they were like the Hipwood thing's an example. The Hipwood goal from the pocket's an incredible, low percentage goal. But I think it's a great example of he had time to at least steady and take the shot, because it was a 2-on-2. It was him and Lohman, I think. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the two Swans defenders, but it was 2-on-2. It wasn't a life and death struggle with like 15 blokes fighting over the footy in the pocket, which is seemingly what we do every single time the ball is in dispute. But yeah, their ability to control space and then control the length on the ground was just sensational. And they just asked questions that the Swans did not have any answers for. It was fantastic.
Yeah, so I went on Saturday. It was my first ever grand final. I've been holding the whole line of I don't want to go until the Blues are in there, and then you sort of look in the mirror, you realize 33 years has gone by, and you're like, what am I waiting for? And it was just
like, do you think it's a bit like sometimes you take for granted? Like I've always said, the Australian Open's a great example. It's like sometimes people maybe take for granted. It's like you'd be kicking yourself if you didn't go and watch Roger Federer once.
Yeah.
Like every summer for 20 years, the guy turned up and played tennis. You're like, just go and watch him once.
Yep.
Like you've got no excuse, Novak or Rafa or whoever you want to let, and whoever you want to list. It's like it's in your backyard. Just go down and buy a ticket and experience it for once, so you can at least say, "Oh no, I did. I went along. It was unbelievable."
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I just the level of concentration, and to not allow 1 or 2 minutes or possessions in the Swans' favour, or goals, or just passages of play, to not let them snowball. And the Lions, I think I was reminded, I think we all know this. I mean, you need to be battle hardened. You need to be able to continue to show up, to persist. I mean, they had poor injuries this year as well. I mean, they lost Coleman and McCarthy. I think one more. I mean, Ashcroft came back in late into the fold. Gardner. Yeah. So it's not like they weren't injured, but they were also healthy when it mattered. And the trust and concentration between all of them was really impressive. And I don't know, then I started thinking, well, we were kind of with them in the bottom four in 2018, maybe?
Yeah, like 15, 16, obviously they had the second pick to ours in 15. And look, people talk about that, and sometimes I'm like, well, we all go different ways about it, but the Lions being able to prize Charlie Cameron out for pick 12, and you're like, well, we had that with Papley, and because the Swans couldn't get their shit together and Essendon couldn't get their stuff together, and we miss out on Papley. And then you're like, they get Lachie Neale for, like they paid for him, but they get him for ultimately what was a really good price. And then they get Joe Danaher as a free agent. We just haven't been able to prize that quality of free agent out, or that quality of trade acquisition. We've got some guys that have come into the footy club and been good players for us and made a difference for us. But to the Lions' credit, they were able to get a couple guys across the line that are genuine difference makers for them. They get Ashcroft. They don't get him in an open draft, that's just the way it goes. Hopefully, we get one of those in one of the Campos or Cody Walker. Hopefully, one of those falls our way sooner rather than later. But sometimes it's the way you shake the tree and see what falls out. And they've gotten a couple of really, really good acquisitions from A, being brave, B, being prepared to push the boat out. And that's, fair play to them. But I think, what I think they did sort of really, really well, just in general, is use the disappointment of last year. Like, I think that some people can probably take for granted. Last year was the first. It was the first grand final Brisbane had made, in this Chris Fagan era, but they'd been a good team. They'd lost prelims and the like. And to lose by a kick is just demoralised, devastating.
Yeah.
And it's the toll that it takes on the group, the playing group and the coaches and everyone emotionally is significant. And sometimes teams don't really come back from that. St Kilda was a great example in 10, 11, or 9 and 10, sorry, for 11. They started the year horribly and then sort of got themselves right the longer the year went and got back into it. But I wasn't surprised that Brisbane started the year poorly, only so much that round one rolls around, or round zero, and they start the game really, really well, and we're able to roll over the top of them. But for a team that was a kick away from winning the premiership, they're now as far away as they can possibly be from another crack.
Yeah.
We're 23 more games away. We're minimum 3 more finals away, and we're miles away.
It's done less of a preseason than everyone else.
This is it. And it's sort of not about it being an excuse, but just mentally, you just cooked. You just absolutely cooked. And I think that in the end, for them, losing the grand final last year and coming so close, Sydney obviously in 22 were just nowhere. They got blown off the park. Brisbane were really, really close to winning the premiership last year. And I think the Swans, although they played in the grand final the year earlier, Brisbane just, I think, it's not that, I hate saying it, but it's like, did they want it more, or they just wanted it more, or whatever? They played like a team that looked like they wanted it more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember going into the game thinking, okay, both teams at their absolute best. I think the Swans were more enticing for me. But then when it came down to it, I think Wayne here in the comments sort of mentioned it as well. I mean, that forward line for the Swans just got swallowed by the Brisbane defense, and all of a sudden it was just a glaring mismatch. And when the midfield wasn't getting on top and they weren't kicking their goals from those midfielders, it just became such an expose.
Absolutely. You looked at them and you thought, I think I sent the tweet partway through the game that, the Hawthorn bringing in Barras and Battle, and you watched the Swans' performance on Saturday, you thought, the Swans' interest in Sam Frost makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like they need big defenders. They've got big forwards in Amadi and McLean, but clearly you can't replace Buddy Franklin at his absolute best, and they had him for the better part of 10 years. But they are, you mentioned Heaney, Gould and Warner, unbelievable midfield trio that we saw it firsthand up at the SCG, just cut us apart, absolutely obliterated us. On Brownlow night, I think at one point in the count, they've got the three of those guys had like 65 votes between them at round 15 or whatever it was. That's what wins them games, that midfield trio, that incredibly explosive midfield trio. If you can curtail them, you'll go an awfully long way to stopping the Swans, because just forward of the ball, Tapley is obviously dangerous. What's the bloke? Hayward is obviously dangerous.
Yeah.
But other than that, they can be a bit inconsistent. And then behind the ball, clearly, they're just a little bit undersized, and they don't really have the out-and-out key back. They're an interesting list, because you sort of look at them and you go, you're a brilliant team and you're constantly there or thereabouts. And maybe we all get sucked into looking at a result like Saturday's and thinking, geez, what are they missing? Because it looks like they're missing heaps.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, at one point in time, they looked incredible. It looks like it was their flags, their flag to win from 15 weeks out. So fascinating game on Saturday, and full credit to the Lions for just brutally exposing any weakness that the Swans had.
What does it tell you about the Blues and what's missing? Like, how far is the gap? What do you think as your priority? And I guess I'll open the question up to those of you watching at home. Like, what are we missing apart from everything? But what do you look at as the priority?
Look, it's all year in the media, when the Swans play well and they run through the middle and they tear your heart out going route one straight to goal. everyone talks about how quick they are. Everyone just talks about how fast they are. They move the ball, they put speed on the game, etc. And you go, yeah, like we need to be quicker. Every team at the end of every season would have pace on their whiteboard as, we need we need more speed, clearly. It's also how you move the ball. And Brisbane, when they got the ball into a position from which they could attack, the way they went through the gears from there and the way they went from, I'll put the tweet out again. They were across half back and Richo on the call was lamenting them just kicking the ball around across half back. But the second they decided there was an option in the middle and they went.
Yep.
They went one, and then they went again over the top, and then they went again over the top and kicked the goal. And you just went, because you moved the ball well. You moved the ball clinically, efficiently. You slowed it down initially, but when you went fast.
Yes.
So I think what we need, in answer to that long-winded, pace. Everyone needs pace. We need a new game style, clearly, because our game style had been figured out from 2/3 of the way through the season. Probably the Bulldogs game is a really good example of that. It's over with. The way we're playing footy is just not going to win us anything in 2025 because it didn't win us anything in 2024. And then you've got mentality was pointed out by one of the viewers, absolutely spot on. Just some confidence, just some strut, just some those intangibles, really, to know that we've played good footy against good teams and we've beaten good teams. It's not 5 years ago. We're not, we're close. A lot of teams are close, but we should be feeling closer than, maybe some on the outside would like us to be. Some on the outside would probably like us to be a million miles away. Geez, if we can just get a few tweaks right and play a little bit smarter, play to maybe the personnel and the strengths that we've got, try to utilize the goal kickers that we have in the front half. We obviously need, the big one is the second tall defender. That's clearly a point of interest. But for me, the must-haves at the moment primarily is a new game style. We need to be attacking the goal differently. We need to be attacking the goal from, again, we spoke on the show this year about the straighter you attack, the more options you have. If you think about standing at pure centre half back, you've almost got 270 degrees in which to move the ball. If you go further up the ground, you've got 180 degrees in which to move the ball. We just don't test teams because we attack from way too wide. We attack from out on the flanks and out on the wings, which mean that the straightest the ball will go inside 50 is pretty much directly, 25, 30 metres right out, directly in front, which makes you easy to defend. You just defend with numbers, and you can easily turn everything into a markers up.
Yeah.
So we need to think about that. How are we moving the ball? How are we attacking? How are we creating space for our forwards? Speed, that's a given. Everyone could use speed. And then that second key defender to partner Wiedering is huge. Massive.
Yeah. With the health of this list, how much of a difference do you think it makes? Let's just say we go from 3 players that played every game this year to 10 to 12. Is that really going to make that much of a difference?
I think it just makes a difference to continuity and form, and it just means if boys are playing every game, they're fit, which means that, the availability is such an important thing because it does give you continuity. So if you and I, if we were going to play, it doesn't matter what it is, just local indoor soccer, and the same 5 mates play every single week, well, yeah, after 4 or 5 weeks, you'll notice, we're actually sort of playing well together. And then if you get 1 or 2 ring-ins, you'll immediately notice, we're just not quite on the same wavelength. A few things broke down just because I couldn't anticipate, because Terry wasn't playing tonight, I couldn't anticipate necessarily what they were going to do. Continuity is huge. It's everything. The more players play together more often, the more consistent your run of form will be. And therefore, I think the better the run of form will be. It doesn't mean that you win the flag. It doesn't mean that you just take all but before you and march on to glory. But it just means that you just got fewer things to worry about. You think about a defensive group. If you can get a defensive group together to play together more or less every week, how confident are they in each other? You add one new, someone new into that, there are teething problems. There is a little bit, once you're in the cut and thrust of the game, people make mistakes, or they run to the wrong spot, or they get in your way or whatever the case might be. But yeah, if we can find a way to improve our availability, and every team would be saying this, the benefits are there. It would be worth at least a couple of wins for us.
Yeah, I had this chat last week, and I was on another podcast, and we asked the question, like, what if it was 10 to 12 games that 10 to 12 players that had played every game, or how much of a difference? And I thought maybe 3 wins, 3 extra, which in the grand scheme of things makes us that puts us at 16 wins. I mean, that's going to be all different next year because it's a new story.
Yeah, well, 100%. And you think about it, like, so the Saints game, the last game of the year, just as an example, how many players do we have out that day? We lost by a kick. And then, look, the Saints were missing a few guys as well, don't get me wrong, but we had a couple of boys out, we lose by a kick. That's one where you sort of go, geez, if we had 3, if we had 2 extra guys running around, maybe we win that game. So the problem that we had, and Damien makes the point that the best ability is availability, but the problem that we had as the season wore on was, respectfully, we weren't missing players 25, 32, 34. We were missing best 18 players. We were missing players on every line every week. And it just made it hard. You're playing good teams without your best players, and it makes it difficult.
Yeah. Where do you think our point of difference will come? Because, I mean, you can get caught in the trap of looking at other teams and what they're doing well and try and emulate that. I think Hawthorn's the buzz team of the year and the way they go about it. But I remember back in 2022, Sam Mitchell distinctly saying, we're going to do it our way. We're going to get ahead of everyone else. And then by the time in 3-4 years' time, we'll be doing it better than anyone else. So where do you see that point of difference coming from Carlton?
It's an easy question to answer because I've thought the same thing for years, and maybe we just can't do it. Maybe we're just incapable of doing it. Our point of difference should be the fact that we've got 2 guys capable of kicking 80 goals.
Yeah.
And there are very, very few teams in the competition that have 2 genuine power forwards.
Mm.
Our biggest problem is they've been together now since the 2015 draft, and we just can't seem to manufacture a way to maximize that. For whatever the reason is, I don't know. But they played some really good footy together, don't get me wrong. But like these guys, for anyone out there, these guys should be Dwight York and Andy Cole from 98, 99 for Manchester United. They should just be unstoppable as a pairing. But I just don't know why we can't coax that out of them. I just don't know why. There's a comment there from Bugs Bell that JSOS back next year, perfect foil up forward. I think what fascinates me about our forward structure next year is if Owies moves on, and I try to get myself in the mindset of you try to understand list decisions because we don't know what's going on internally, but all we can do is sort of try to put our Carlton list manager hat on and think about, okay, why they're making this decision. And maybe the rationale is always goes, who from the outside supporters kind of go, but why are you getting rid of a guy that's been kicking 30 goals every year? Well, maybe they think the net of Charlie, Harry, Jack Silvani, Fogg, Motlop, hopefully with a full preseason. There's always someone I forget. There's obviously talk of McGovern kind of going forward. Who knows?
Yeah. And then there's the Ashton, who everyone wants to see now.
Ashton Moore. Hold on, he's the one I forgot. So Ashton Moore, maybe they sort of think the net of building a forward line, a new-ish looking forward line that doesn't include this guy, maybe it won't be better. Like, who knows? But at least maybe the rationale is we want to try something and we think that this could be better. So I've got no problem with the club, someone there putting their, sticking their neck out and saying, we're prepared to move this guy on because we think that we can do better without. If that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. But the centerpiece to all that is we have to get more out of Charlie and Harry, and we have to give them better looks. We have to give them more space, and we have to give their opponents more one-on-one contests. Because we've seen it. They can't. They're beasts.
Yeah.
How many defenders in the league can really go one-on-one for a full 120 with Harry and Charlie?
I always found it interesting I always found it interesting that the narrative is Carlton are predictable with the way they move the ball forward, and we are, because you've got Harry and Charlie there, and I always found it interesting that we couldn't use that narrative and flip it and say, well, we know how the defense is going to set up, and that's predictable. So
100%.
there has to be space somewhere. It's like we can't find that space.
One of my favourite Carlton many, many years ago, and it was late on in Dustin Fletcher's career. Listeners will, and the viewers, some of them will remember this. But remember when Mitch Robinson used to play defensive forward role on Dustin Fletcher?
Yeah.
And the argument was, we know you're not going to go to. We didn't have Fev at that stage. I think Fev had moved on. But the argument was, we know that you're not going to go to a forward, whether it was Hendo or Waite or whoever. So we'll put a defensive forward on you to keep you accountable. And it was Robbo. And what Robbo will do then is negate and tag and take you deep. And if you go with him, fantastic, you're accounted for. You're not going to be able to go third man up. But if you don't, we're going to go through Robbo. He'll push up high half forward and we'll just use him. And what it created, as you said, there was this predictability about, well, we know how you want to use Dustin Fletcher, so we're going to negate that. We just don't seem to do a lot of that. We just don't seem to, when we beat Collingwood in the second game last year, the strength of that win was getting the ball in quick, and it was getting the ball in deep, and it was getting the ball into a one-on-one between Darcy Moore and Charlie Curnow, and one of those two guys didn't want to be in a contest.
Yeah.
And we just were able to exploit. He's going to get handsy, and he's going to get grabby, and he's going to infringe, because that's what defenders do when they're panicked. And we give. I think Fad made the comment. I can't remember how he phrased it, but it was something like, we just let defenses off the hook pretty much every week with how we move the ball and where we put our key pieces and what we ask our key forwards to do. That to me is the big area of improvement for us, is to make life easier for our point of difference, which is the two big key forwards. Because there are teams in the league, Terry, that would kill to have one of them.
Yep.
Melbourne would kill to have one of Charlie and Harry. Collingwood would probably kill to have one of them. Essendon, Richmond now, Tom Lynch is getting a bit older, but the same thing, all these teams would kill to have one of these guys. The fact that we've got two of them and we can't seem to really figure out what we want to do with them is just nonsensical.
So having taken that all into account, if you could make one change or improvement in what we have right now, whether that's on field, off field, like what are you looking at? Where are your priorities in that regard?
So it's two-pronged. So the on-field thing, and this is just wishful thinking because I don't think it's realistic. But the talk obviously about Dan Houston was ramping up a bit today, and I don't pay much attention to that just at the moment because there's too much that has to happen, and trade period's the most tedious time of the year. Goes way too long, and nothing
2 weeks
happens.
would be literally 48 hours.
It's just nonsensical. It's bad. But the Dan Houston chat is what it is. We need Sam De Koning more than we need Dan Houston. And Sam De Koning is almost certainly not available. But be ruthless. Be ruthless and go to De Koning's manager and say, we're interested, we're really keen. Would you have played on Saturday? If Geelong had beaten Brisbane in the preliminary final, would they have picked you to play?
Make the case.
We would have.
Yeah.
You clearly, they can tell you everything they want. They can whisper sweet nothings in your ear, Sam. But the bottom line is you were fit for some games in the back end of the year and they did not pick you. Yeah, they like you. And yeah, you'll play footy next year. And you had some injuries and whatever, but they didn't pick you to play in the biggest game of the year. And I don't think they would have picked him to play in the grand final. Get in his ear. You're thinking about it. You want to do it. You'd come into us. You'd be the number 2 to Wiedering. You'd be the number 2 to Wiedering for the next however many years, etc. He's the guy. He's the no-brainer for me that you part with picks for. You just go, no problems in the world. What do you want? What do you want to start with? And then, again, as I keep saying, nonsense. Almost certainly he's not leaving. He's a fantastic player and he's very young and Geelong won't want to let him go. But you've got to prize some guys out. You've got to actually make the case for them that we want you, we need to get you. And then off the field, we've said it for years and years and years, Terry, we can't keep going into new seasons with the same people making the same mistakes. Like, we can't. I'm sure that Brad Lloyd is a lovely guy, and I'm sure that he works really, really hard. I'm sure that everyone down at the footy club really appreciates the effort he puts in and his service to the club. I think he joined in 2018, as I said earlier. We can't keep having conversations at the end of years about what needs to change and keeping the person in charge of implementing those changes in their role.
Let's break down him and his role. So ultimately, what is the head of football there for? It's from how I understand it, it's the conduit between board and department.
Yeah, you're just the general manager of the football department. Is a department like any other in the football club, and you are the general manager of that department.
Right. So ultimately, you're judged on the decisions that you make, appointments, the listings, or departures. I mean, he came in 2018. So what's that? That's Bolton. That's Bolton into Teague. Teague. Then he added Henry Playfair to the mix to help Teague with his coaching. I think Russell comes. Oh, does he get credit for Russell, or does he whatever? I'm trying to think of bold decisions that fall under his accountability. And it's like we don't talk to him. He doesn't speak as much. I look at our assistant coaches. They come and go every year. He's had 6 years now. This is his department. He's built. I think it's fair to say in 6 years, this is the department that he would have want to put together. Now it's, maybe 2 or 3 years isn't enough time. We had the external review in that time.
100%. Like, I was just thinking then, it's not exactly the same, but probably a really interesting example. Like, it's not the exact same role, but an interesting sort of. If anyone's seen the movie Moneyball, Billy Bean is the head of football. So Brad Pitt's character is ultimately responsible for the performance of the baseball team.
Right.
Building it. It's a little bit different because he's a bit more hands-on with trades and we have a list manager and whatnot. But in terms of his responsibility in this big organization of lots and lots of people, some of them are doing social, media. Some of them are doing the commercial elements, memberships and merchandise. Some of them are doing sponsorships and looking after that. Brad Lloyd's responsibility is the football department. And as you mentioned, staffing it, reviewing it, interrogating it, questioning key people within there, trying to drive and improve results within the football department. And I think the fact that we've gotten better at various times in his tenure has often been almost in spite of the decisions that he has made whilst he's been at the helm. You think about the list that we've been able to cobble together. You'd be pretty freaking disappointed if that group of players, our best 22, wasn't winning more games than it was losing. Whether it is a premiership list is to be determined. We need to do some remodeling. We need to add some pieces. Every team does every year. But you'd be pretty disappointed if you just slid, a playing list on a bit of paper and you read that 46 names and were told they win 45% of the time. You'd go, what?
Yeah.
You go, seriously? They're like a 50-50 team?
Well, my question about him at this stage, I remember the interview after Charlie hurt his ankle, and he just so blasé made the comment that he'd been carrying the ankle for however long. So now I know a lot goes into that. So there's Charlie putting his hand up. There's probably Voss and Russell at the time, but Lloyd as well. It's his department. So I don't know how much of a percentage to apportion the blame, so to speak. But how many times do we sit at the end of a season and say that situation could have been managed better? That could have been managed better. That decision could have been better. And how does everyone else fall on those decisions except him?
So this is it. So in 2021, we had a wonderful decision, a wonderful opportunity, I should say, to really reset everything. The Carlton Football Club, as fans, everyone involved was fully on board. And to this day, I am, with 2015, when Sauce comes back to the club and under Lejudice and they bring in Bolton, and everyone was fully on the same page. We were in lockstep, that full reset, let's go, just like salt the earth type stuff. We're going back to ground zero. And you went, okay, yep, No, I thought this was going to be painful. I think everyone anticipated it was going to be painful, but it's pain for long-term gain.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be, very, very, very rarely does this happen in any sport, really, let alone a sport that is as restrictive with the draft and the salary cap mechanisms that the AFL has. You're never going to turn that around in 2 and 3 years. Look at the Brisbane have been in the mix, and you could argue that they kind of started their rebuild when we did, and they've just won a flag now. You go, fantastic, really, that's wonderful for them. But come 2021, it was time to kind of go, okay, this phase of the rebuild has gotten us to a point, and we're happy with a spine, and we're happy with key elements of it, and we're happy with, A, B, and C as terms of acquisitions and what they mean for us on the field. However, it's time to turn the keys over to someone else. And as it turns out, it was a new coach. It should have been a new fitness boss. It should have been a new footy boss. Because I think it was Cook as well. I think Cook came in as well. It was like we should be going. You guys have shepherded this project as far as you possibly can. Lloyd had come in halfway through anyway. He'd come in 18 and been there then for 18, 19, 20, 21. Like you think about it, 4 years, that's a long time. 4 years is a long time in any job.
Yeah.
Let alone a job as hands-on as this, for us to walk away with a pretty good idea as to your competencies and what are you actually delivering. And then we've given him 22, 23, 24, and the same problems keep happening. The same questions about strength and conditioning, the same questions about development, the
Mind
same
you,
questions about
this is after the
after the
redevelopment
review.
and the high performance
This is
center was
after that
built.
stuff.
Yeah.
Spot on. And you go, so all of these things, the same questions and some of the same issues persist. And to me, like you think about it, so 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So that's like 6 years. 6 years ago. That's a long time. And like really, in that whole time under his watch as head of football, the Carlton Football Club, we had a really good start to the year in 22 and completely fell apart. We had a really good end to 23 and made a prelim. We had a pretty good first 2/3 of this year, and then the arse sort of fell out of us again. So that's a trend. That's the same thing happening in 3 years in a row, just at either the start of the year, the back of the year. What are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Like, what's the footy club doing about it? Who's questioning it? Who's questioning? I hate saying this. I really do. But like anyone who's listened to us for however long knows that we spoke about Andrew Russell 3 years ago
Many years ago.
as being
I
a
reckon the
bit
first
of a
pod
watch.
that I did with you guys in 2019, we were talking about Andrew
Like-
Russell.
But like we've spoken for quite a few years that this is a problem and something that we need to look at fixing, and we need to get. I stopped short of saying we weren't carrying pitchforks to Icon Park saying you need to sack Brad Lloyd and you need to sack Andrew Russell, but it's like this has been a problem now for too long.
Yeah.
That inaction is bad. Inaction
Yeah.
will see us go backwards. We're so close. It's so competitive. The AFL landscape at the moment is so competitive, and we are so close to giving ourselves a really good crack to compete at the pointy end. I keep saying it. We've shown that our best footy is pretty good. How do we play it more often? How do we unlock that? I just don't feel like we make bold enough decisions to pursue that. And I would love as a fan, like if the Carlton Football Club came out and were absolutely ruthless, whether it be trading someone or moving someone on, a key figure within the football department, and made it abundantly clear that this is in the best interest, this is in the pursuit of us getting better, you'd go, okay.
Well,
okay.
One of my biggest, not fears, but it's a concern for next year, is that we know that there are two big posts that are definitely changing. Sayers is definitely going at the end of next year. So there's going to be a new president and new leadership. And every time there's new leadership, something changes and someone wants to bring and then put their own stamp on things and bring in their own mandates. And that's just the way it works. Cook, by all reports, next year is his last year. And we're already thinking about it.
How have you seen Cook and his time with us?
I don't know if we hold firm last year if Cook's not there.
That's fair
I feel
enough. Yeah, that's fair enough.
I don't think we hold firm and stick together and not sack Voss if Cook's not there personally.
I feel like I've used this phrase with you in the past. I'm going to use it again. It was only a matter of time before I said this. Whether it be the football club, and then Cook's a really good example of this. I feel like we're just less than the sum of our parts. Andrew Russell's highly credentialed, highly regarded strength and conditioning guy, but we just never looked fit. You got Brad Lloyd, who comes in from, used to be a player agent, has done list management stuff at Freo, comes across, and you're like, you don't seem like a really cutting edge sort of guy in this space. Your resume looks amazing. And then you got Cook. You're like, you might be the best footy administrator in the AFL era. But what are we getting out of that at the moment? On paper, it all, like Luke says, you got unbelievably successful, private business, and that's another conversation altogether I know nothing about. But you're sort of going, and the facility's been redeveloped.
Mate, the high performance center.
You look back at that, you go, why is this not adding up to more than what it is at the moment? Why is it not? Why are we, fifth or sixth at best, sort of in there or thereabouts? And that's the question for me. And Cook is a centerpiece to that, just because I just thought, were we going to get more out of this guy at the helm? I don't know what that is. Like, it's, unless you're there day to day looking at that stuff, you kind of like, oh, what does it mean? But
yeah, look, that's fair. But the point I'm making is they're going to change. So that already in my mind smells of excuse. Change is happening at some point when you know that there is a new direction that someone is going to be going into. We get to round 18, 19, end of the year next year. Who are we listening to? Sayers and Cook, or the next people who are in charge? Like, who's actually in charge and who's actually making the decisions? And I'm concerned that that's going to rock us a bit.
That's why I suppose a lot of teams will look to promote from within. We mentioned continuity and stability from a playing perspective before. The more games a midfield group, a backs group, a forwards group play together, the more cohesive they will play. That's probably why a lot of teams look to appoint successors from within the organisation, because it just gives you some stability. For us, you're like, well, who is it? Who's the number two at the Carlton Football Club?
Yeah.
You know what it is? It's like the US, like the presidential thing. It's like if something bad happened, we've got it here too, don't get me wrong, but it's like if something bad happens to the president, everyone knows who's the new president.
Yeah.
So if something Cook goes, well, are we just in the market for a CEO? They were talking about Xavier Campbell, obviously, which is concerning because Essendon fans they had no time for him at the end of his time at Essendon.
No.
So you're kind of like, oh, well, I don't know the ins and outs of that. But from a CEO point of view, it's an incredibly important role, as you said, in terms of. I remember once listening to this podcast, and someone said, "Oh, what does a director do in a movie?" It said the director's role is to organize the end credits.
Yeah.
It's like when you really think about it, like the cinematographer, the director of photography is doing an incredible amount of work. He's the one shooting the film, and or X, Y, and Z, whatever. So what does a director actually do? And that's probably a bit like the CEO. But a really good CEO knows when to do something. They know when to step in and they know when to give direction. And it does leave us in an interesting spot because there will be some incredibly there'll be some incredibly significant turnover at president, CEO, footy boss. They're three of the sort of five most important pillars at the footy club.
Mm-hmm. And so there's that. And then, I mean, just going back to the original question of what can we add, I still think our actual coaching team or our department needs another senior piece in there of sorts. I know that Russell was on, he was a highly paid individual in that role, one of the highest in the league reportedly. So I don't know what the salary of Rob's going to be, but I dare say there's room, given I'm guessing he's not going to be as highly paid as Andrew Russell. So I'm guessing there's room to beef up the department or make that change now.
We certainly need new ideas and we need new voices in the coach's box. We used it ages ago, this example on the show of the red team, the idea that the red team and red blood cells, white blood cells, red blood cells attack things. I don't know if we've got someone in our coaching group who's prepared to be a you-know-what. I don't know if there's someone in there who's prepared to, like, the team for the elimination final, not picking TDK, not starting TDK, not having Chincotta out there to run with Zorko, et cetera, et cetera. Was there anyone in match committee who said, I think it's dumb?
Is that a Brad Lloyd? Is that a head of football? Is
it could be whoever it does. To be fair, the person saying that, it actually almost doesn't matter who that person is, whether they're an assistant coach, a footy director, whatever. But the person who can actually go, I don't think that's a good idea, guys. Yeah, I wouldn't be thinking about that. What about this, this, and this? Because when you get groupthink and when you get sort of yes men, well, if the going's good, it's great. But if things are bad, if things are going poorly, then it falls apart. You can see the wheels falling off in real time. And I think I've said this a few times of late. Footy clubs are the worst place to become insular and safe, because that's when things start to go poorly or start to go wrong, when you don't have someone there to rattle a few cages and to shake things up a little bit. And the reason is because they probably think they're going to get sacked.
Yeah, so looking out for themselves. Yeah.
They probably think, oh, fucking Terry's he's a bit argumentative and he's a bit difficult and whatever. And rather than someone going, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? They're having a different perspective and a different set of ideas. Rather than saying that, they go, yeah, we probably should get rid of him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I definitely feel a sense of like this fear of conflict of sorts. Definitely get a sense of that. And I use the example of when Voss came out after the first Geelong game and said that was unacceptable. Sort of all took us by, I don't know about you, took me by surprise. I was like, oh, we're ready to start talking like this now. Great. And then before you knew it, he was back to whatever he finished the season with. And then by the end of the season, we got the, beeping out the swear words, which was awesome, because it's like, okay, that's what I picture Michael Voss to be like. Only to then hear him back talking in that post-game interview. It's like, what are we? What do you want to be? What do you want to show? And are you sure of it?
Look, I've had the good fortune of talking to a few players who have played under Chris Scott. And just interesting, like just picking their brain and sort of going, what's he like, And one of them was really good. He goes, no, he's great. He's very much like a manager, like a soccer manager, which I think is what Chris Fagan's like. Right. And they have different personalities, therein. But he goes, Chris Scott would very, very rarely, if ever, talk to players after a game. Get us in the meeting room and have a chat. It's, what do I want to say? I want to decompress. I want to think about what I want to say. He goes, and then in the club during the week, he goes, if you ran into him in the hallway, you'd have a chat and, hey, how you going, Terry? How you feeling? Yeah, good stuff, blah, blah. He goes, but it was very professional. I think that Voss has gone a different way. That's not to say that doesn't work or can't work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't leave you very many places to go when the going is bad. If you're too close, if you're too cuddly, it doesn't leave you too many levers to pull when we serve up really poor performances.
Yeah. Well, then there's that next layer. And so for me, I'm all for pointing to the heads of departments and accountability and awesome. But like, there also has to come a point where, when does the diligence of the players taking ownership of their own careers come into play? So like my position this year on the whole Russell thing was, yeah, Russell's the head of it. He's going to be accountable for it, held accountable for it. Great. But the next guy is going to come in. We've got this new high performance center with this state-of-the-art facility. But like, if the players are not doing what they're supposed to do outside of the club as a collective, maybe 65 to 70% of them are, well, it doesn't matter who you've got there. Like, what's the collective commitment? Is everyone swimming in the right direction? And it was interesting that a few of them mentioned rowing in the same direction in their postseason media reviews. So at what point is the playing group ready to be spoken to and at like adults and the fans as well?
So this comes from I don't want to put all the blame on Voss, because he's just one man. He's the senior coach. What I was heartened by some of those interviews, and you mentioned there was a consistent line, and that's no accident.
Yeah.
It needs to come from the leaders.
Mm.
Non-negotiables, attitudes, preparation, rehabs, all that kind of stuff needs to come from the leaders. Voss can say it, and he would be saying it, absolutely. And the leaders have to buy in. And if they don't buy in, if they don't agree wholly, they need to work with the coach to create something that is, that is good for everyone, because their feedback's important, because they're in the change room, they're on the track, they're hearing all the scuttlebutt and the whispers, from the 46 odd blokes in the playing group. But it needs to come from Voss, from Wiedering, from Doherty, from Charlie, from Harry, from the main boys. Or, we all know who they are. And they need to be driving it in such an uncompromising, ruthless way. And it's honestly as simple as, not about embarrassing people or not about shaming people. It's not, but you don't have to do it in public. But say you and I are teammates and you don't do your gym, or you haven't done it properly, or you haven't done some rehab or something like that. Well, I come up to you, go, Tez, come back. What are you doing? And you just eyeball them and go, what are you doing? No. I won't tell the story exactly, but I heard a great story about Sam Mitchell some time ago, and a really great conversation he had with Josh Gibson when Josh Gibson came to the footy club. And Sam had basically said to him, we're here to win flags. And if you're not, you're no good to us. If you're just happy being a senior AFL footballer, you can do that, but not here.
Mm.
And Josh Gibson ended up becoming, I think he won 2 best and fairest in premiership years, and 3-time premiership player, and a really important player for that Hawthorn team in that era. The players, once the coach and the leaders set whatever the standards are, whatever the expectations are, and where we want to live or what we want to live by, and then it's up to the leaders and the rest of the group to really, really, really enforce it.
Yeah.
And
I definitely. Yeah.
we're getting to that.
I definitely have seen a different language almost spoken by Patrick Cripps. And that's partly him maturing, growing up. There was almost this sense of, I'm sick of being the best in this group. And I'm 30 soon. And what are we doing? We just finished 8th. Like, I don't care that there's another Brownlow. Like, a Brownlow's great,
Look at how good. Oh, look, it's one of those things that, you mentioned, Cripper having that attitude. That attitude was 100%, or that thing was 100% aligned when Juddy got to the footy club.
Yeah. And
people on the outside, I think, misinterpreted it. But it was a question of, well, who can go with him?
Yeah.
And Murph went with him. Simo lifted his game, Carazzo lifted his game, etc. Clearly, we ultimately weren't good enough. But this idea of the challenge for me, if I'm Michael Voss, if I'm a line coach at the footy club, is, well, knock him off. Everything at a football club's a competition.
Yeah. Everything.
Every drill. Every PB in the gym, everything. Well, target someone in a friendly, your teammates, you're on the same team.
Well, they've been together long enough now to have trust with each other.
That's it. But who's the benchmark?
Yeah.
Who's the benchmark in whatever? And go, I'm gonna knock you off. I'm gonna push you, and my target is, I'm sick of looking at the back of your singlet running the time trial around Princess Park. I'm gonna knock you off.
Yeah.
And that, you drag people with you. You drag people with you at the moment. And I hope that what we're seeing as a consequence of the way the season sort of petered out for us, there would have been a lot of frustration with going into a final series with so many guys so underdone, or maybe not even available, as the case might be. There would have been so much frustration from the playing group that, we get here, but we're not getting here. We're getting here with one arm tied behind our back, really.
Yeah. We're
not getting here with our best opportunity to beat these good teams. We can beat them, but just not enough is quite going our way to do it. Hopefully, the leaders out of this season have looked at that and all thought, the clock's ticking on everyone. What do we have to do? maybe we have to be a bit more serious, a bit more ruthless.
Well,
You know?
do you know what I feel sometimes? I felt it towards the end, and maybe I'm just being irrational and emotional, but by the end of it, I started having this thought and, I don't know, realization, if you want to call it, that, I think documenting everything for so long and really not being so much closer than what we were at the start, or maybe not close enough. But I had this realization where I thought we could just not win a flag for 10 years and it would still be profitable. So, like, for the fans, the flag's everything. For the club, the flag's one of 3 to 4 things that makes a successful organization. And I'm just left wondering, like, how much of a desperation is there for it? And then I sort of realized, why would there be? We have 16. Why would we be so desperate for another one when we're still profitable? Our membership increases by X amount of percent every single year. So you can generate a report of success every single year from it. That's how I've felt towards the end. Like, it is one
Terry,
of the
it's
most important things, but not the most important.
yeah, I agree with you completely. I mentioned it just before. Like, people who listen to us know, like, I'm a Man United fan. Man United had a disastrous decade. And it doesn't really matter because they still sell ludicrous sponsorship agreements for the front of their shirt and the signage at Old Trafford. And they still sell Old Trafford out every single week. And they're still one of the most talked about, sporting brands in the world. The fact that they're in crisis or lurching from one crisis to the next ultimately doesn't really affect the bottom line all that much. They're still a profitable football club. They're still one of the most profitable football clubs in the world. They don't really need to win to keep their shareholders and their owners happy. It's this really weird sort of paradox. It's this strange existence where the football club is. It ultimately doesn't matter what happens in 2024 or 2025. The Carlton Football Club will, they'll have an economic forecast as to we'll make this much money in those 2 years, and everyone will get paid, and it'll be fine. We'll all have a job, and it'll be good. Like, if we win, we win. That's great. And every club's like that, Yeah, like, it'll be fine in the end. If we win or if we don't win, materialistic, there's no change. That's why we're almost at the phase, like, everyone needs good players. You need to draft ability. You need to draft talent, clearly. But you need character and you need mentality. And you just need ruthless winners. You just need.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what you're getting until, after the fact. You can never be sure, but we probably need to be trying to target, characters who are just all in all the time.
Yeah. Those that are willing to come in and challenge. Well, I remember when we drafted Sam Walsh, there was a big bit around him being like that at such a young age. And I feel like we've got a good portion of them. I mean, ultimately, I don't truly know what the collective mindset of the group is. My sense is that there's a good chunk of them now that are maturing in age and life experience and becoming fathers, and they understand that their time is finite, and they're really starting to dial in on their diligence away from football, and you see them playing more games than what they used to. And then I just feel like there's some that are just so inconsistent, and we're just left saying, oh, well, we got injured. And I'm always asking, like, which of those injuries were in our control, which ones weren't?
It's so funny you mentioned the becoming fathers thing, and it's such an interesting. There's no answer to this. I'm not need to put this on the record.
Right.
I'm not casting judgment one way or the other. It's just a topic for discussion.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little interview tidbits from any sporting interview, and the reason it came to me immediately the second you said players are maturing, they're having kids and all that, and you go, yeah, it's a wonderful time in their lives, and that starts to take the priority quite understandably in their lives. Their children, full on, and I'm not judging them for that. I'm just saying it's a consequence of having kids. I remember seeing Mika Hakkinen was interviewed after his career had ended. And for those people who know their F1, Mika Hakkinen had an unbelievable crash, like just one of the worst crashes in the history of Formula One in the early 90s. Unbelievable that he survived, just incredible. And when he retired some years later, double world champion, they asked him, what was the catalyst? Like, what did you people thought you probably still had a few years in you, and you hung up your gloves and your racing helmet and said goodbye. And he didn't even think. He goes, my kids, he goes, everything, all of a sudden, the barriers just seemed a little bit closer. All the walls and the gravel and the car just seemed to be going a little bit quicker, because I wasn't just selfishly racing for myself without a care in the world. It was now all of a sudden there's a consequence here. If something goes wrong and I end up in the wall, it's not just me that's affected. And it's that interesting kind of thing with, sometimes the kids are probably fucking unbelievable. It's a brilliant thing for a professional footballer to have and to share it with, and they wouldn't change it for the world. And then you just wonder, is there a flip side to that conversation? And I don't know, because I'm not a professional athlete, clearly. But you just wonder, is there a flip side to that conversation whereby, is it helping professional athletes actually achieve what they want to achieve? Be so single-minded, be so focused and, I don't know, selfish, because you can't be. It's an interesting sort of chat potentially.
Yeah. Well, Nathan Buckley talks a lot about his time in the game, and he basically put a lot of his self-worth on the wins and losses and the results, and that's how he adjudicated whether he was going well or whether he wasn't. And it wasn't until he started actually enjoying the whole process of it and the whole journey of it that he found fulfillment from football. So there's that, and that's where I've tried to just enjoy the good times while they're here, because I understand that I may not see one. I may not. I hope I do. I fucking should. We all should. In a 50-year time span, we should hope to see at least one, or expect to see one, maybe. Or maybe we shouldn't expect to see any. But I've reflected on the year, and I'm like, well, I'm so easily pleased. And that's maybe a conditioning for the generation that I've lived through, that 5 in a row is just like, wow. First time ever I've seen 5 in a row or 4 in a row. Like, these are all new experiences for me, or the first final, the first semi-final, and, the first prelim I saw was last year. And I do wonder if that plays a part in this generation and their expectations, because the next generation will not give a fuck. They're in a different, I see it with my brother. Like, my brother can tune out like that. He's 10 years younger than me. Like, he's not like rusted onto the Carlton Football Club, and see a lot of them like that. But I'm one generation. I was going to say, I'm one generation removed from that 90s culture.
I think the reality is, and you touched on it earlier, there's nothing wrong. The footy discourse on Twitter and social media in general has got it all wrong. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your team having a good win.
Yeah.
And realistically, Patrick Cripps wins the Brownlow, this time last week. There's nothing wrong with taking encouragement and heart and enjoying a player of yours win the Brownlow medal or a Coleman medal or get an All-Australian jumper. Because realistically, the fans of 17 clubs every year go without.
Yeah.
Only one team could win the premiership, Brisbane. And then everyone else is varying degrees of happy or unhappy with how their season went. You've probably got teams that thought we probably come out of 2024 feeling as if we underperformed relative to expectations. And that's not saying we were going to win the premiership, but we probably figured an elimination final loss and just sneaking into the 8 is an underperformance. Hawthorn would be thinking the other way. They'd be thinking, well, geez, we're ahead of schedule here. We didn't expect a semi-final loss. That means we won a final. Oh, wow. The reality is everyone but Brisbane fans on the Sunday after grand final day are wanting to feel like Brisbane. But it doesn't mean that, you can't look back on the year and think, geez, what a fact that third quarter against the Giants.
Yeah.
Or blowing Geelong off the park late in that game, or, the comeback against Brisbane in opening round, etc. Football seasons are full of so many ups and downs, so many highs and lows. And ultimately only one club gets the highest of highs.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. And I think that sometimes, with us, I've gotten to the point now where I just roll my eyes when people mention, 30-year drought with us, and you're going, yeah, we know. It's not a surprise. This is not something that's off the record. This is not something that the AFL community and the Carlton Football Club have tried to suppress. Going, everyone knows who won every grand final after us. Going, we haven't been good enough to win one. Going, That's how it goes. But it doesn't mean that we aren't capable of playing good football. It doesn't mean that we aren't capable of contending. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't enjoy watching our team win a game of football. And that goes for every team in the competition. But it is ultimately what we need to be striving for. We just ultimately, that needs to be, the prime directive of the football club is to win the premiership. So as the Carlton brass sit there today, the Monday after the grand final, how are we getting ourselves best placed to compete for the 2025 premiership? What do we have already that we think will help us get there? What don't we have? How do we get it? Can we get it? And that's why we mentioned Brad Lloyd before and others. Go and be bold. Go and be really, really brave. Like a couple of years ago, the LA Rams went all in the trade deadline to win the Super Bowl that year.
Mm.
And they were good enough too. They win the Super Bowl that year, and then now have sort of fallen off a cliff a little bit. But they recognised and they said, we can go, we can win it. But we've got to do this, this, and this. And we're going to mortgage a bit of our future to do it. But if we win it, it'll be worth everything. And it would be. We've got so many pieces that are good enough to get us there. We're not quite good enough. Clearly, everyone knows that. So what do we do to get better?
Yeah.
And there can't be any half measures or half steps to get there.
Yeah. Do you think it was reasonable last year? Because I know that this year we moved on Russell, right? Do you think it was reasonable at the end of last year? We make a prelim to think we figured it out and we didn't need to make change. I mean, hindsight's always great after the fact, but and I don't know if that played a part in what happened this year, but we make a prelim, everyone backed off for the most part. Like, I don't think I've seen a collective backing off from the Carlton Football Club like what I saw this year. Not just from fans, but from media, mainstream media as well. Like, even when we started finding ourselves in the hole, a lot of the pundits were talking about, like, no, they're going to figure it out. They're going to figure it out. Was there a comfort there? Was it reasonable?
I think there was, when you look back on it, and a lot of this stuff only reveals itself after the fact.
Yeah.
I think we were complacent.
Mm.
And I think there was a degree of satisfaction that in the back part of 23, in the back part of 23, we'd figured it out, and we were playing the football that a lot of fans and a lot of people within the football club would have fated us to play.
Mm.
We were finally the team that we were destined to be when we went back to the draft in 2015. This is it. We've figured it out. And as it turns out, the first part of the year was okay. We had some ups and downs. We lost to Collingwood, it was disappointing. Lost to Sydney up there was bad. But even then, I think Saad didn't play that day. Shera might not have, but Wiedering gets the cork, and you're sort of looking at things. Cottrell, who'd been playing good football, was out at that point, and you sort of went, we weren't good enough, but geez, Saad and Cottrell would have been a really big help for our ability to defend Warner and Gould and running through the middle of the ground, and we didn't have them. We started really well, and then Wiedering went down. You went, okay, all right, let's. And then from that, we just couldn't pull the nose up, because so much of football is about being able to evolve what you're doing and to be able to stay one step ahead of the chasing pack. And we didn't do that. We got found out and we got caught out, and we were just stuck in quicksand in the back half of the year.
Yeah.
So that to me speaks to a footy department that was comfortable with where we were without forecasting or seeing ahead, well, what happens if? And at the end of the day, like that, it came undone for us. And because of that, we just played out the back part of the year, hoping things would turn around and hoping we'd figure things out. But ultimately, we just played out the back half of the year as no threat to the rest of the competition.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I mean, it just feels like a hamster wheel, because the easiest thing to sell with this club is hope. the easiest thing to sell. So I don't know.
If there's anyone in the chat, I've mentioned Manchester United enough. If there's anyone in the chat that remembers it, the joke forever and ever and ever and ever and ever was Liverpool fans. It's next year's our year. Next year's our year. And you're like, yeah, sure, okay. You've been saying this for 20 years. Next year's our year. And it wasn't until they started making sensible hires and they started signing or spending money wisely and actually buying players that were making a difference, and they figured out what's our identity and they purchased players that fit directly into how do we want to play. And then they started getting joy. And I think that Carlton for too long has nibbled around the edges of a problem. So the footy department's a problem, Terry, yeah?
Yeah, it's a problem.
But at Carlton, I see the footy department problem as being footy boss, development of our players, a little bit of recruiting at the time. You know, we've done okay at the pointy ends of draft. We've had misses there as well. Haven't really done really well outside of like the first round of a draft for a little while. Like Amoya looks like he's an okay kind of prospect, and we'll wait and see on a few others from last year. But talent acquisition's been a problem. Development of that talent once it comes into the footy club's been a problem. Strength and conditioning's been a problem. Overall coaching and game styles become a problem, etc. And we seem to kind of be like the lazy stay-at-home husband fixing. We'll fix one problem every weekend, or every other weekend we'll fix one of the problems.
You get to October, the grass still hasn't been mowed.
This is it. You're kind of going, well, when are you going to get to this, and this? Like, when are you going to fix this? I don't understand. And we seem to kick the can down the road a lot and hope that something will fix itself or right itself, and then act like dumbfounded when it hasn't. Be like, that problem that we didn't fix is still there, and I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, yeah, it's the same as it was 3 years ago. Yeah. Because you haven't done anything about it. So that's the problem, I suppose.
Delayed. Just delays. I don't know. I'm looking forward to a rejig and a refresh, because like at the moment, like everything is just, I just don't believe anything that I read. I just don't believe it after believing it so much and trusting in it. Like I saw we had Dione, who's always in the live chat. She flew in from Thailand. She lives there after Geelong. We had Jade, who lives in Italy. She flew back for prelim week and grand final week. We had I have never seen Carlton fans believe, and I mean not the newer generation, even like the ones who have seen the success. They were like, nah, when it clicks, you'll know it. This is it. It was something else. I had not really seen it. I would say there was more belief round 15, 16 this year than what there was going into the prelim last year. It was fascinating. And then we became the only team in the 8 to not be able to find ourselves again after losing ourselves.
Yeah, and look, I think that what's that a consequence of? Like that's an interesting conversation for people inside the footy club to be able to pinpoint. You know, like we go to the huddle against GWS, having played the most scintillating quarter of football. A little bit. Wiedering had the kickback inboard, which gets chopped off and they kick a goal. But we've just played 25 of the most electro, and we weren't even very good.
Yeah.
Like we were playing all right footy, and we put 8 goals on the board. Just incredible football. And whatever happened to that huddle is, I would love to know, because probably nothing did. But from that point on in the season, like we were in freefall. And you just sort of went, what has changed? Like before the siren went 6 minutes ago, you guys were you were sending shudders through the AFL community with how you were playing, and then the Giants come out and they rejigged a few things and they changed and they got some joy, and they were able to overrun us and just put us away. But you just went, how has this happened?
Was it always wrong and we were getting away with it? Or
yeah, no, that's a great question. You go, how has this happened? Because like in the first quarter of that game, we looked unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you just went, oh, geez, this is like, we spoke last time, I think I was on the show, and he said, people take it the wrong way. People take someone else enjoying their football club as winning games of football as the proclamations that we're going to win the flag, give us the flag, or they watch Daniel Gorringe do his funny skits and they think he's just doing what like Lou Richards and these guys, Teddy Whitten, what they used to do 30 and 40 and 50 years ago to wind up idiots who don't get it.
Yeah.
Because he's playing a bit of a character to wind you all up and you all get sucked in. The idea that Teddy Whitten, I'll wear a South Australian jumper down Rundle Mall if the Crow Eaters beat the Vicks. And it's just all a bit of fun. It's all a bit of theatre. Fans were looking at that stage of the year going, geez, we look really good.
Yeah.
We're looking good.
Yeah. Where did you sit with where we were? Did you believe? Like, what was your belief levels like?
Yeah, I think like you were. I was sort of quietly confident that as the weeks went by and you sort of went, we're playing. And the Geelong game was great, and then to kind of put one over Essendon was really good as well. There's another game in there, like the Richmond game was sort of interesting, but the way that they just put the foot down, and you sort of went like, this is what good teams do. We've seen good teams do this for years. We just haven't been the team doing it. And you went, okay, this is really encouraging. It feels like, you use the word believe, it sort of feels a bit like the group is starting to believe, and that's starting to turn for them, and they're starting to realize, okay, we're actually pretty good. Okay, this is all right. And then the wheels just fell off. Like I said, that second quarter against the Giants, the game against the Bulldogs was so frustrating, to be in it, but kind of not really playing very well, and then ultimately lose. As quickly as it looked to have manifested that confidence and that belief, it just disappeared.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what happens because I don't know if this goes for a lot of people, but it almost felt like there was a pass given to them after the way last year ended, and then they ended up continuing on the momentum and got themselves in a good spot. But that runs out next year, and the pressure's on, and pressure's always on. But the impatience, I feel, will rear its head quicker next year than what it did this year. So I don't know. Who knows? What I do feel as being true is there is some sort of attitude problem within, and that's got to be fixed, because I don't know if the fans are a reflection of the players as well. I mean, they're Carlton people as much as what we are. I mean, they get to do something about it. We're all getting excited that this may be it, doing predictors. I'm sure they were doing the same thing. And like, how can you prevent that from happening? They're just human beings at the end of the day. Yes, they're professionals. Yes, they get paid well. And yes, all of this, but they still would have been feeling that they're going to win the flag as what we did.
Oh, they run into people in the street.
Yeah.
Just in their day-to-day life. We want to talk about the footy, and look, it comes back to it earlier. We mentioned leadership and that stuff. And, for us, like the story with 95 was that after the disappointments of 93 and 94, we were a good enough team to win one of the 93 and 94 flags, and ultimately didn't. The story goes that the coaches basically took a back seat, I should say, and that the senior leaders basically ran the club. Kernahan, Silvani, Bradley, etc. Just ran the club and led it. This is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. If you're not in, then, good to us. I would love to see us at that stage where the senior leaders, and look, maybe they do this. We're not inside. We don't know. But I would love to see a situation where the senior leaders just take so much more ownership within the group, of almost like in a weird sort of way, like Survivor style. It's like almost in terms of selection or something, just going to the coaches and saying A, B, and C they're not eligible for selection this week.
Yeah.
Because of they're not in, or they're not, sometimes there are players who just take a little while to mature and a little while to get it. But when they do, the rewards are just enormous.
Yeah.
Stevie Johnson's a great one, where Stevie Johnson broke his ankle because he was drunk and he jumped over a fence one night in the preseason, and the players down at Geelong, famously, everyone talks about that meeting they had where they got into Gary Ablett Jr. and Scarlett just hit him between the eyes, and a few of the other boys as well. It's like, yeah, Stevie Johnson was one, Chapman might have been one. And you're just like, we've got a lot of the pieces of the puzzle here if we're serious.
Yeah.
And that's not saying, someone mentioned there and hit the nail on the head in the chat there, that flags are really, really hard to win.
Mm-hmm.
Like, premierships are so hard to win. And if this list ultimately doesn't win a flag, the core of this list, we should say, because the list is always changing, but they gave it a real red hot crack and they gave it a real shake, and well, that's how it goes.
Mm.
At the moment, well, if the time was to end with a 16-point loss in a prelim final up in Brisbane, if that was to be the best that the core of this group achieved, that would be an underachievement. But were they to get, like the Brisbane list of, getting to within prelims and getting to within touching distance a few times, they were a good list for a number of years and they finally salute. It's really, really hard to win them. But at the moment, the core of this list is better than one preliminary final.
Yeah.
And I hope that core recognises that. And I hope that core uses that to go, we need A, B, C, and D. We need you to come with us.
Yeah. That was one of my biggest lessons as a footy fan when that Judd Murphy-Gibbs Cruiser group reached, what was the pinnacle of that group? 3-0 in 2012?
Yeah, semi-final in 11 and then 3-0.
And that ended up being like the peak of that group. And I just thought we were set up for years of good times. And I think I said this last week, I'm like, be careful, because that prelim, well, that semi-final win against the D's last year might be the best thing. I don't think it will, but I didn't think it was going to be the peak of that group back then either. And so I'm just mindful of that.
What we've got to, like, in this national competition, what we've got to do better, the reason the home and away season is so important in this day and age is because going back to 2001, we lost the semi-final to Richmond, but every single finals exit, and bearing in mind, yes, there aren't very many of them, but every single finals exit after that is interstate. 9 in Brisbane,
True.
10 in Sydney,
Sorry,
11
Sydney?
in 11 was West
WA?
Coast, 13 was Sydney again, and then obviously we missed for ages and ages and ages, and then lost last year in Brisbane, and then this year in Brisbane. The reason those home and away games are so important to get yourself into a position where you don't have to travel, where you've got home ground. That's all part of the maturation of that qualification journey to get yourself into a position where you control your destiny. And like you said, a semi-final last year, it'd be really disappointing if that's the best that this core group had to offer, because we all believe that they've got more in them. And were that to be the case, then so be it. That's it. There's nothing that you and I can do about that. We certainly hope and wish and want for more, but the reality is those leaders, surely they know that there is better there for them.
Yeah.
And we just need to, they just need to help. They just need people to come along with them and help us, get to where we want to go.
Shifting away slightly from Carlton, what are you making of the shake-up in the Channel 9, Channel 7 stakes, Fox Footy? Like there's a bit of a paradigm shift potentially happening. I know you've spoken, again, probably since we first did the Prendercast episode together in 2019 about the overlap style of content.
Terry, it's the most obvious thing in the world.
It's
I don't know
so obvious.
It's the most obvious thing in the world. Fox Footy. So I think I saw a thing today where it's Robbo's not on Fox Footy 360 anymore.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
Oh, by the way, if Slobbo's in the chat, make yourself know. We have a guy with an account named Slobbo, and he's hilarious. But anyway,
I think he's in there somewhere. So
yeah,
that's not the worst thing in the world. Like,
no,
Channel 7's got a graveyard when it comes to footy shows, and this goes all the way back to Live and Kicking, of course. And they had a show which I didn't mind in the early, maybe the mid to late 90s, called Four Quarters, and it was on like a Friday night before the footy was on. It was a bit of a before the game type hybrid, not front bar-y, but it was a little bit of a mix. But Channel 7's history of producing footy shows is disastrous. Apart from maybe Talking Footy, which is effectively became On the Couch and then later became Talking Footy again, they just can't do it for whatever reason. I just don't know why. For me, Kane Cornes going to Channel 7 is really fascinating. It feels like BT going to 7. It feels like BT going to 3AW in that you're not an AW caller. You're a matey, take the piss out of each other, Triple M caller. You are not an AW caller. And in the same way that Kane Cornes, I just don't think you're a Channel 7 talent.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be something completely different to be a Channel 7 talent, which, why are they hiring you? It's a bit like, I don't know if anyone in the chat's watching the Penguin show with Colin Farrell, where you're like, they put Colin Farrell under so much makeup and they make him look like this fat guy and they have him speak like Tony Soprano, like a, New York gangster. He's like, why are you hiring Farrell to put him in fat suit and change his voice? Just hire someone else. Colin Farrell's brilliant in the role, but just hire. Why are you hiding him under all this prosthesis? And yeah, I feel that way with Kane Cornes going to 7, where it's like, if you want strong opinions, just tell one of your existing people to have strong opinions. Just go for it. I think the biggest conversation here isn't 7, because 7 are always hamstrung by broadcasting restrictions. Like they're not going to jam pack their schedule with footy content in the same way that Channel 9 aren't going to jam pack their schedule with footy content. Footy for them is a nice plug and play, whereby we know we've got Friday nights, we know we've got Saturday night, we know we've got Sunday. What do we put around it? Okay, Monday night can be a talking footy. What else can we do? Can we do a Sunday like they used to do with Rex Hunt? Can we do a Sunday wrap-up show, etc.? Channel 9, the same, they don't have the footy, so they're just happy doing their Sunday footy show and their footy classifieds, whatever. The big one's Fox Footy. Like, why Fox Footy? Why someone at Fox Footy is just ripping off the overlap wholesale? I've got no idea. AFL 360 has been running forever and a day, and it's past its use-by date. The formula is dead. Maybe just run it like on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, which is sort of what they do anyway. But rejig the format, rejig the hosts. Get Gerard Whateley his own, not open mic, but get Gerard Whateley his own show where he interviews or takes on contemporarily the big stories.
The big stories, yeah.
So middle of the year, Gerard Whateley does a 1 hour sit down every week, and in the middle of the year, he would have got Laura Kane on. And he just sits down with Laura Kane and they talk through, he just interviews her. For the interview goes for 45 minutes, but an hour with ads, where he gets Andrew Dillon on. In the aftermath of the Brownlow, he has Patrick Cripps on. Maybe you do a coaches forum, or you do an administrators forum where you get Brian Cook and, Brendan Gale and whoever else on to talk about administrating in footy contemporarily, blah, blah, blah. Get the absolute, creme de la creme of the contemporary footy conversation in. They have a conversation with the game's premier interviewer, which is what he is. So do that once a week. Do fan debates, guys. Do a show once a week where you get, yourself, you go in, and every team's got 1 or 2 people where you go in and you talk about the issues of the week or where your team is or where your team's going, and you sit there and you talk it out. They need to refresh what they're doing, because at the moment they're just producing it's a bit like Carlton. They're just producing the same stuff year on year and wondering why it's not working.
One of the big things I've seen in media is, so when Twitter came out, I remember they used to read some live tweets and say, oh, well, the Twitter feed is showing us this, this, and that. And I think they gave up on it somewhere, someone along the line gave up on it. I believe the future of content, live content, is having a live chat and a live audience that, sometimes things don't get stale, but your live audience and your live chat helps the show go in whatever direction you want it to go. And
well, think about, you're probably too young, but remember the show that someone in the chat, what was Clinton Gribus's show?
Clinton Gribus.
So it was
he's the one that passed away, right?
Yeah. So Clinton Gribus had a show on Fox, which was the precursor to sort of 360-ish. Mm-hmm. And he would take calls. You could call into the show, like talkback radio.
Like fan cams before video.
White Line Fever is what it was called. And so Clinton Gribus was the host, and you'd have a guest on, and you could call in like it was talkback radio. I just reckon the footy forum thing, and you could get West Coast or Adelaide fans via the screen. You could have them go to the local Fox Footy studio, for instance, in Adelaide, and have them come in via the screen so they can be part of it if you're from an interstate club. But yeah, the 9 and 7 stuff doesn't fascinate me as much as the Fox stuff, because just sunny Roblox down there. Well, if you like football, you're sort of fascinated by football content because good football content's good to consume. So the better the content that's being made is, I think the better the game is. And in the case of, like I said, Fox Footy, I think there's some really fun stuff that they could do. Like even little things like I'm not a huge fan of him, but get a Jack Rewalt to do the Gary Neville one where he would. The overlap doesn't do the walk and talk so much anymore, but the walk and talk interviews were fantastic.
Yeah, well,
I'll put the one with Roy Keane on. I'll put the one where he walks through the park in Manchester with Roy Keane. Roy Keane's just walking his dog, and they have like an hour-long chat about it. It's compelling. It's brilliant.
See, I find part
imagine
of the
that.
issue
Imagine tuning in on a Wednesday night, and it's like, and the other one I came up with. Sorry, imagine tuning in on a Wednesday night, and say it's Jack Rewalt. It can be anyone. Has got Dustin Martin on, and they're going for a walk through Richmond, just talking about his career, or they've got whoever it might be, just talking about their career. Imagine a Thursday night, you sit down and go, Nathan Buckley is the best example, but you get Nathan Buckley and you call the show the War Room or the War Games or something, and you get Nathan Buckley, a former senior AFL coach, to War Games 2 games from the weekend. So Thursday night, Friday night footy, we're going to have a look at Friday night footy, Carlton playing Collingwood. What the Blues are going to look to do is this, and actually have him present as if he's coaching Carlton.
Yeah.
How are Carlton going to win the game? And have him in the war, have him on do the top-down camera where he's got like a digital screen where he can move players around and stuff. Talk to us at an elevated level.
Educate
us. And it would be that was the biggest missed opportunity with Channel 9 when they had Ross Lyon. And they just didn't really do anything like that. Little tiny bits and pieces here and there. But
yeah, and those little 3-minute segments were compelling.
Yeah. And you were like, this is sort of interesting, but it always felt like he was holding back a little bit.
Yeah.
If you went to Buckley and said, I want to do a show where you basically coach a couple of teams every weekend, and you take the fans through how you're setting up, how would you use this guy, how have they been using him, how can Team A exploit whatever it might be. But the Robbo news, as I said, interested me because I thought they should totally take this as an opportunity to completely reformulate how they approach their coverage and almost relaunch the channel.
100%. Well, I think the attitude,
fan debates, all that stuff.
I think with the fan debate stuff and just fan content creators in general, I think there's this attitude that whenever integrating fans into footy media, it's always for entertainment purposes, and it's always to highlight how crazy and stupid and nuffy and and they're not lower class, that's maybe the wrong word, but there's a jovial part of it, like, what would you know, you're just a fan. There are a lot of fans that talk about the game in obviously a way that lacks context, because a lot of us, if not all of us, are not on the inside, but we're not morons. We're just super passionate.
The example, and I've said this, might have even said it to you when having these conversations in the past. Everyone in the chat, to have a think about this. How many times in the past have you been sitting down watching a game of footy with your friends, with your family, and you or someone in the room says or beats the colour commentators to an observation? How often does that happen? Honestly, you're watching the game with your mates at the pub or in the lounge room with your friends who got them over. How many times a game does someone in the room beat 4-time premiership player, premiership captain, X-time All-Australian to an observation?
Yeah. It's
the George Costanza, I'd be really good at special comments. You see, well, they usually give that to ex-players and people in broadcasting. No, I think what you would get, and if you do the fan forums, and the overlaps work this out as well, you work out who's an idiot and who you don't invite back.
Yeah.
Basically, you work it out real quick.
Yeah.
You work out who elevates the conversation and who doesn't. And I honestly think what that does, what the fan debate does too, is from a YouTube from a perspective. Obviously, first run viewers who are subscribers get the content through Foxtel initially, but it's the most social media friendly content they'll be producing.
Yeah.
Will be Terry from Blue Abroad butting heads with whoever from someone, sensational, whatever they are. Or, and Carlton play Collingwood and, the two fan representatives are engaged in a bit of banter about an umpiring decision that went their way or didn't, or whatever the case might be. That's where they're going to get the most traction for social media impressions and views and all that kind of stuff. It just seems, like I said, there's a couple shows that we've just rattled off there that someone in the chat mentioned it, that these aren't expensive to make. Like, they're not expensive shows to make. And
You're
they're
not paying
fresh
a lot of
and they're
money
new.
for talent, if at all. Well, the
No,
currency
you
is attention and eyeballs. That's the currency. It's a new.
You know what they'd be paying, like, if at all, like, just to start, if they did one of those fan debates, they're probably just putting on pizzas.
Yeah.
Like, and saying to come down, we're going to shoot a show for an hour, we'll feed you and pay for parking, or I don't know. And, send you on your way. But
2 tickets to the game.
Oh, well, whatever the case might be. And
yeah.
And the benefits seem, as I said, I keep going back around in circles on it. But yeah, the Channel 9 and 7 stuff is sort of fascinating because 7 have done this once before and it didn't really work for them, where they were poaching 9 people and they just didn't quite know how to use them. But the Fox Footy conversation's the bigger one, because you're like, you've got a channel that you need to fill with footy content.
Yeah.
Like, and all you're doing is replaying 365 times a day, and replaying on the couch. And
do you have any idea what's happened to, like, the games from every game in the season in 2010 and why they aren't just on repeat on a AFL owned YouTube channel, like 24/7? Like, because if you like, I mean, I watch poker, and World Poker Tour have 2 live streams that run 24/7 all day every day. And I don't know the answer to the question, and maybe there is an answer, and it's, TV rights and whatever. But how is there not a channel of sorts that just has 24/7 game after game after game? Like, how does that not exist?
Well, we've said it in the past. Like, there should be, every so often, there should be the big one for me, actually changing tack a little bit, is, and I would love to know at the AFL, if there is anyone at the AFL who is responsible for this. Someone there just said, by the way, Gavin, AFL do not know how to utilize YouTube, and someone before mentioned something I've been on about for years. The AFL should stream 1 game a week in a European-friendly time zone on YouTube.
Yeah.
Inaccessible. Make geo block it in Australia.
Yeah.
If you want to be, or maybe have it be the Channel 7 game on a Saturday night or whatever. But stream 1 game a week live on YouTube. YouTube is the most underutilized. It's the biggest broadcast platform in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most underutilized thing. The fact that no one, and we still don't have it, and I forgot to tweet this the other day. I was busy. Fortunately, I actually had something to do on Friday, which was unusual. Why there isn't that was the season that was?
Yeah.
Why? Are you too young? Do you remember?
Game after game?
No. So that was the season that was a thing that Channel 7 used to run on the Friday night before the grand final into the footy marathon. And it was just a recap of the year. It was just a 2-hour long, that was the season that was, here, all the stories and the highlights of the year. And it's like, why are you not doing this? Why is nobody doing that was the season that was? I used to love, my nan used to have, like, all the cassettes. Like, so whenever they started doing it, and she would tape that was the season that was, and she just had them in the little cupboard. So in the off season, when you're clamoring and craving footy, you just chuck on all that. Well, what year is it? Oh yeah, it's 97. Oh, it's 91. And you just chuck it on and watch it. It was great. Some of them are on YouTube. I do go back and watch them from time to time, just to have them on in the background. But there are just so many gaps. There are just so many gaps in the footy media landscape that are just, and I don't know why they're not being utilised. Is it because the people producing these stuff, are they just a bit old? Do they just not see where the media landscape is going currently? Do they just not really value YouTube? Do they not? I don't know. Do they still see it, YouTube, as the silly platform that no one watches?
For sure.
It's a weird one.
One day, Sean. One day, everything will be everything. Will we ever get to a point where we're saying,
I was going to say,
Gee.
will we ever get to the point where we're happy? No.
yeah,
Never.
where we're saying, gee, everything's thriving? And I say this about umpiring.
Everything's
all the time.
great. I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, I guess the Blues, the Carlton Football Club, they're all saying everything's all good. We're on the right track. The process.
Going on, really? Okay. Going on, I'm not seeing it that way.
It's too good.
That to me is such a fascinating just conversation. And as I said, I mentioned it earlier, but the Robbo news is really interesting because you're like,
Yeah.
would you consider? We spoke about Carlton going into the war room and wiping everything off the whiteboard and starting from scratch. It was like, would you seriously consider starting from scratch? Because I think you probably need to.
Yeah.
And I think you probably need to. I think you probably need to be prepared to make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
In the pursuit of cracking something that's amazing.
Either way, you're going to get criticised. Either way, that's just the way.
Because you think about it realistically, the Front Bar, which would be the preeminent sports show on Australian TV, just about. Well, that's just, and it's very, very good, but that's just an evolution of what Before the Game used to be.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA was made by the same people and same producers, and you're like, yeah, because they recognised that Before the Game was a really, really good watch, and the fact that Channel 10 lost the rights meant that show couldn't continue. But we can still take out all the relevant parts we need and go and do this other show, which has all the hallmarks. And it's like, it just made perfect sense. Just, you know what they try to be? They try to be the NFL. They try to be the NFL broadcasts.
Mm.
And it just standing up in the booth, and it's like, no, don't do that. Don't do the NFL. Look at the way that Europeans look at the way the Europeans present stuff. Look at the way they present soccer, and it's a little less stuffy and it's a bit more dressed down. I never want to see. Terry, I don't want to see people presenting football wearing suits.
Oh, thank you.
I don't need to see. You shouldn't be wearing a suit and a tie calling a game of football.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
It's not a visit of the Queen. It's Saturday night footy between the Dockers and the Bulldogs from Etihad.
Yeah,
it's like
put a hoodie on,
dress it down a bit, wear a nice bomber jacket maybe, and a collared t-shirt. Okay, just be comfortable.
Yeah,
just be comfortable. It's
a good point.
And actually, someone here says Front Bar got refused from every network and only got off the ground when Mick Malloy funded us at a web series. 1,000%. 1,000%.
Is that right?
Totally. And the producers that came on board were like Before the Game producers. Obviously, Mick Malloy was on Before the Game, and Andy Marr clearly was on there as well. And if Sam Pang was in the media at the time, he would have been too. But the runaway success of that, I think at one point it was on like the AFL website and whatnot. It actually got to the point where it probably got too big before people realised this should probably be something more than just a web series.
Yeah,
it just goes to show. But yeah, there's so many things that you would like to think, you would hope that different people are working on, but I don't think they are. It's the classic, the Simpsons, the guy at the Duff Brewery, when he goes, we got a few things up our sleeve, and Homer asks him like, what? And he goes, nothing. We got nothing. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, that was great. That was an hour and 48 minutes. I don't really know when that happened. It always seems to do this with you, though. Always.
It's a problem.
No, it's not. I've enjoyed it. It's good. I felt like I got things off my chest, and then I felt like I started talking about solutions for the game. So it was a bit of both. Excellent. Well, that's good. I'm happy that I could be of help. What do you do in off season? What is the Prendercast? What's the map out the next bit of time now? Well, you mentioned earlier fans jetting in, hopeful Blues fans jetting into Melbourne prelim final week, grand final week. Tim has jetted off with the family, school holidays, to I don't know if he's in Bali or Thailand or somewhere. I don't know exactly where he's gone. Southeast Asia somewhere. And I think he's back next week. So we'll do some player, like a end of season reviews. We go through each player. We did that. We didn't do that last year for some reason.
but we'll
because
do
we all
that.
got
So we do.
comfortable. We're all fine, mate. We've got
That's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exactly. We got complacent as much as anyone out there. But we'll do that, and then we'll have a little bit of fun and do many years ago. People who have listened to us for a long time will remember we did a premiership draft where we Fab and I drafted players on our list from 1996 onwards who are not Carlton premiership players and tried to build like the best team. And because we did it in 2018, I think, and like Harry Mackay's not in any of the teams, Jacob Wiedering's not in any of the teams, Sam Walsh is obviously not on the list at that point, etc. So we had a bit of a laugh and thought we'll redo that again now that we've got like some decent players. We've got like 6 years worth of fairly decent players to add to the teams. But yeah, we'll just do some bits and pieces like that, player reviews, some little silly draft things, trade wrap when that rolls around, and that'll be about it, I think.
Love it.
And then a Christmas special, which we did one last year, which was really well received, and we were laughing about it because we were like, what do we even talk about in the third week of December? Like, what were we even talking about at that time?
Are you still
What made it a Christmas special?
Are you still going to do like movie reviews and,
no,
things
I
like
still
that?
do those. Yeah, I still do those from time to time.
Yeah.
I've actually started a new one, which is very, very nascent, which I won't give away its location because I want it to remain off the books until it gets better.
Oh,
But basically, it might not get better ever, so you might never hear about it ever again. But the basic concept is, by virtue of the stuff I do in with Box Hill Hawks, for those of us who follow us, you pick up bits and pieces and you pick up gear and whatnot throughout the course of the year. And I sort of thought, I really like just getting out on the bike, like particularly this time of year when the weather's really nice. Like I really like just getting on the push bike and going for a ride and whatever else. And usually you go for a ride and you just chuck the headphones in and you listen to a podcast or listen to some music. And I thought, particularly in the off season, I really like doing movie stuff and TV shows and whatever, pop culture stuff. And I thought, what about I try like a pilot? He gave you a wave. You've been asking for a wave for like an hour.
Here.
But I thought, could I do something like, I've got action cams for the footy club.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't I have one of them on the front of the bike facing forward and then one of them like looking at me. And then as I go for a ride, I'll just mic myself up and just talk about movies. So like it's a concept that sounds bad and it might be terrible. But the basic concept is like, come for a ride with me and you can see where I'm going. And it's like a split screen. You can see where I'm going. And then the camera on me is showing you that I'm doing it. I'm talking as I'm riding. And I just talk about something, about a movie, I did one the other day about the new John Wick spin-off, Ballerina, because I wanted to talk about John Wick's great. And I'm looking forward to that movie. I'll probably do one this week, next week about Joker. But it was like, I think I actually said it at the start of the episode, the ride, where I sort of thought, there's no chance I'm doing this in winter when it's freezing and it's raining and it's windy and it's just shocking. But I did it on Saturday morning, and Saturday was a beautiful day. And I sort of thought, oh, this is a good reason. You get out on the bike and you roll around for an hour and a bit, and you just basically do a podcast on wheels, effectively.
I like it.
Yeah,
audio only.
No, it's a video. It's on YouTube.
Okay, so it's on YouTube right now, but we're just not on YouTube. You're not going to reveal.
I'm not telling you where it is or what it is.
Okay, I'm going to find it.
It's on YouTube because I kind of want to. My idea, and you would know this, Terry. You would know this better than anyone. Because like when you do your first YouTube video and it's got like fucking 8 views.
Oh, I mean, it's supposed to suck.
100%, and this is it. Like, so I'm fully on board. 100%. So like my whole thing is, I kind of want to do a few pilots. So do one and then do another one, do 3 and 4 and 5. And then when it's kind of like, it's sort of okay, work out a few kinks, then then say to people, if you want to watch it, here's like 4 or 5 of them that are already there. So if you sort of like it, there's a few of them. But it's that weird thing where, again, you look at thing and weirdly, I think I posted, it had like 10 views or something. And I'm like, how are people finding this? Like, how has anyone found this video? How has anyone found this? And how is anyone listening to this? It's
Yeah.
it's incredible. But no. So that's something. And again, as we mentioned earlier in the off season, I sort of do a few more of just because it's not really even a time thing. It's just a weather thing. It's just I was a postie for years, and there's nothing worse than being out on the bike in the rain and when it's
Yeah.
freezing cold. It's the worst place in the world.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, yeah, if those of you in the chat are not aware of the Prendercast, I mean, you should be. But if you're not, here is the link to their Patreon.
Oh,
So be sure to get around that. $5 a month. These guys have been around, fucking hell, Sean, 7 years? 8? 7. I was listening to you in
Yeah.
2017 I was listening to
but
the
we've
Prendercast
said this, but
on
we weren't.
buses in Israel.
But we weren't like a Carlton show at that stage.
No, you weren't.
I've said
So
it
there
before,
was
and I'll say
you,
it
the
again.
Carlton show, and that was it.
Well,
I wasn't
so
watching
this is the-
YouTube as much then.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. My favorite comment we've ever received at the Ian Prendercast is when we went to just being a Carlton show, and someone left us a review on Apple Podcasts and just said, "Finally, they've realised they're a Carlton show." And I was like, "Yeah."
That's why you got to pilot things. You got to test it
This
out.
is it. We piloted it for like 12 weeks of just doing weird, like multifaceted sports crap, which was funny. But yeah, been doing it for a while now, and when Tim gets back, we'll go through those player reviews and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. So Richard, no, there. I mean, you guys do have a YouTube channel in theory.
But
most
we don't really
where-
do anything.
Yeah.
No, we don't really do anything on it.
Most
We've done a
of
few. You're
where
on a
people
watch
would-
along. We did a watch along with you. You're on it.
Really? Oh, was that the
Yeah.
2013 elimination final?
Yep.
Oh wow.
We do watch alongs on the Patreon,
Okay.
so we
No,
might.
so where you want to go, people who want to listen, you want to listen on Spotify, but give back. Pay $5 a month and support.
We'll be doing the Patreon things as well. You'll be able to buy them like they'll be like a couple bucks. You don't need to be a member. You'll be able to buy them just as a one-off.
Cool.
Whenever we launch
like
those, whenever Tim gets back from holiday.
I like it. Mate, thanks for coming on. That was really good. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks for everything you do for the Carlton community. Yeah, we'll speak to you again for sure.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
See you guys. Have a good night. Go Blues.